Welcome back. We recently got the news that we were getting a Hero Rises event for 3 Houses characters, which is really cool considering that we do end up getting one of them for free. As a result, I do want to at least go over my thoughts on which units I believe should be the priority overall. This isn't going to be me trying to convince anyone to vote for specific units or change their mind or manipulate or do whatever it may be. I just want to give my overall thoughts. This isn't any sort of propaganda or whatever. It's just a whole opinion piece, whatever it is. I figured I had to preface that just in case. Better safe than sorry, basically. Anyway, I want to go over my personal thoughts on what I believe are going to be the best picks for the overall voting. And some of them may come as a shock simply because I know a lot of the units that are probably going to be voted for are the ones with the super premium fodder or whatnot, or the super really good units, but I kind of want to give my perspective and thoughts on this just because I thought it'd be interesting. We may as well just get into it right away. I have 5 tiers for this. I have the priority tier, good tier, fine tier, no thanks tier, and demotes. Demotes are pretty self-explanatory. They are easily accessible in the 3 and 4 star pool. They have no reason to really be given out for free, especially since they don't really come with anything. The no thanks tier is basically units that either don't really perform all too well nowadays or don't really come with anything in particular that would allow them to be desirable as a fodder unit. And then as we keep going up to fine, good, and priority, these units either have really good fodder or they're just really good competitively. So we may as well just get started with the priority tier in Winter Bernadetta. Winter Bernadetta doesn't exactly have the best fodder. Her fodder's fine. Solo 4 is good, Rouse attack speed is fine. Nothing really too bad, but I didn't really put her up here in priority because of her fodder. I mainly put her up here because of her supportive capabilities and the fact that she's able to damage her allies at the start of the turn if their HP's at full, meaning that they can manipulate their HP to whatever level they want, which is actually really good for Vantage strategies or Gale Force Wings of Mercy strategies. It's really nice, especially in an Aether Raids context or even in Summoner duels with Vantage sweeping. That's why I have Winter Bernadetta up here specifically. I should also mention that this is in alphabetical order, so it's not like Winter Bernadetta is better than Halloween Rhea, for example, because blah. They all do different things, so it's hard to say one is better than the other just because, especially since they do different things. It's not really fair to be yeah, this tank is worse than this support unit, because that doesn't really make any sense. Then we have Summer Ash. The reason Ash is up here is mainly because of his fodder. He has Near Trace, which is really good, and then a 300 SP C slot, which is really nice. You can inherit both of these skills if you really want to, which is really nice. The dual skill is whatever. It's nice for the cavalry units that you want to bring, but I don't think scoring 180 BST is really good nowadays, especially now that we're getting free units that score 185, 190. And then we also have duos that score even up to 200, which definitely raises the bar in Arena. So Arena skills aren't exactly the best in my opinion, but the fact that he has Near Trace and a 300 SP C slot is really good. The same thing is going to apply with Gatekeeper to an extent. You can inherit all his skills for maximum score, which is really nice. You can get Close Counter, Close Reversal, Joint Drive Defense, and Harsh Command Plus in one go if you just have Drive Defense and Harsh Command. And it really does help that Gatekeeper is a really solid support unit with Detailed Report, and now with the available Cancel Control, he can actually be a really anti-meta unit. Then we have Halloween Rhea, who's really good as a unit, and she doesn't have too bad fodder. As a combat unit, she's actually really solid. She ends up tanking a lot. Her damage output's really good with her guaranteed follow-up. The fact that she's able to block follow-ups is also really nice. And then Dragon Ball is also just icing on the cake. Attack Res Unity is nice too. I don't personally prefer it over something like Attack Defense Unity, but it's still a nice skill nonetheless. But even so, her combat is really good, and the fact that she does have Dragon Ball is also really nice, which is why I put her in priority. And that's pretty much it for the priority tier. Next we move on to good. A majority of the units here are here because of the fact that they have really good fodder or they are a really good combat unit. So for example, the Byleths do have really good fodder. Female does have Fury 4, which is really nice for Wings of Mercy and Gale Force strategies, as well as Ruptured Sky, which can be really good for Arena. Male Byleth, instead of Fury, has Distant Counter, which is not bad whatsoever, but he also comes with Ruptured Sky, which is also nice. And as a performance unit, I would say that the Byleths aren't too bad, especially with Creator's Sword being a really solid weapon. Slaying no follow-up, no guard is really good. Constance is also a really good combat unit with pretty decent fodder. She has Trace, which is it's not the best. Far Trace isn't exactly like amazing comparatively to Near Trace in my opinion, but she also has Rhyme. But the fact that she has a really competitive weapon in her Agnes's Arrow is what sells it for me the most. But even if that weapon weren't good, she does have a really solid lineup of skills. Same with Dedue, honestly. Dedue I would have put in priority, but I do favor Far Save more than I do Near Save. And that isn't to say Near Save is bad per se, but I find that a lot more threats are ranged, which is why Near Save I don't think is as good as Far Save would be. But his fodder is still pretty good. He comes with Sturdy Stance 3 and Near Save, which is, again, really good for fodder. Meanwhile, with Flame, she doesn't exactly have good fodder, but the fact that she is able to grant flat damage reduction to allies is really nice, which is also why I have her in good. Happy is a mix of a good combat unit with good skills. I already mentioned that I'm not really a big fan of Far Trace, but she does have Catch, which is pretty nice. And Demonic Tome is also a really solid weapon, granting accelerated cooldown and time pulse at the start of the turn, which is really good for just instant nuking. With her really high attack, she is able to output a significant amount of damage. Then we have Ingrid, who's just a really nice Lance Cav overall. She gets Fire Sweep if she has more speed than the foe by a certain amount, and she also gets true damage, so her damage output's not too bad whatsoever. Summer Ingrid, while not really a decent combat unit, does have decent fodder overall. Sturdy Impact is not bad at all, especially in Aether Reed's defense context, especially when paired with no follow-up, and Guard Bearing is not a bad skill to have around, especially with melee specialist flyers, which is really nice to have, honestly. Then we have Lysithea, who comes with a really good assortment of skills. She has Death Blow 4, Low Speed Res, and Times Pulse. It also helps that Lysithea is a really solid combat unit. She can spam specials, she can run Blazing Wind sets. She's a really good unit overall, and her offensives are really solid, so I can't really recommend her enough. Sophis, the reason I have her up here is not only because she does come with Times Pulse, which is fine on its own, but isn't really what would have sold her for good. But she is a mythic, which is a pretty big boon to have, especially on Dark Season, where even if she isn't the best unit at all, she is able to prevent lift loss, which is a boon to have, which is why I do think, even though as a overall unit she's worse than maybe some of the other units in Fine, I will say that she does have value, which is why I did put her in good. I feel like most people are going to question why I put Yuri in good, considering he's arguably one of the best units in the game at the moment. And the reason I put him in good is not because his father's bad, or not because he isn't a good unit, but because of the fact that he's been on so many banners and he's still going to get reran in the future. He was on the Hero Fest, which was arguably one of the best times to get him. He was on the Legendary banner, he has his debut banner, he's getting reran in a couple months anyway. He was on a dual skill banner. He's been on a lot of banners, and he's not even a year old. And to be honest, I do think he is still a really fantastic unit. So even if he were to win, I wouldn't complain. But I don't think he should be a priority unit simply because there's so many opportunities to get him, and there will continue to be so many opportunities just because IS continues to rerun him. And that's it for the good tier. Then we get to the fine tier, which is basically made up of units that either perform fairly okay or their fodder is fine. Bernadette is a fine combat unit. She isn't the best by any means, but she does the job well enough. She has attack speed push and low speed defense, which is perfectly fine for fodder, which is again why I put her in fine. So nothing to write home about there, but it's fine. Catherine isn't too bad of a unit overall, but I wouldn't say it's like good per se. I will say that her fodder is also on par with Bernadette simply because low speed defense is really nice, but the A slots are also really competitive on top of the fact that there are just a lot of other options. So I don't think Swift Sparrow 3 really sells it, especially since, again, there's just a lot of other options and the fact that it's on so many units that it's not really a priority, or it's not really the best in my opinion. So I think fine is good enough for her. Claude is again a similar situation. He has speed, defense, lull, and I don't think attack speed push is really going to put him any lower or any higher than Bernadetta simply because attack speed push, similar to Catherine, It's really, really common, so I don't think it's anything to write home about. So it's fine. And lows are still pretty decent, so I don't think it's anything bad per se or no thanks. So I'll leave him there. Dimitri is also a similar case. His weapon isn't exactly good. He isn't really a good combat unit at the moment, but he does have attack, defense, lull, and death blow 4, which is perfectly fine. I won't say death blow 4 is any better than Swift Sparrow 3, but he does have that lull, which is what sells him for me, in my opinion, in the fine tier. And then we have Hilda, who also faces another situation of she has good skills, but it's on pretty much everybody. So it's not something that allows her to stand out comparatively. Like, she's not a bad unit, and she doesn't have bad fodder, but the skills are very, very commonplace, which is why I don't think it's worth prioritizing her over somebody else. On the other hand, we do have Winter Manuela, who has Winter Rapier, which is a really solid inheritable sword. She has Seasonal Lock, which does raise her value a bit, especially since you can't really get Winter Rapier all too often. You will have to wait till the end of the year. So it is nice to have around. And then we have Marianne, and I did mention earlier that I do not value dual skills simply because we have units that can naturally score 185, 190, and then duos that can score 200 now. Arena is way too inflated with score, which is why I don't think dual skills are really worthwhile anymore. She does have a lull, and she does have joint drive res, which is pretty good, which is why I did also put her in fine. Combat-wise, she's also not bad, but I don't think it's anywhere comparatively to the other units that are having good. Then we have Summer Mercedes, who's fine. She has attack res trace and attack res push. Honestly, if it wasn't for the trace, I probably would have put her in no thanks, but trace isn't too bad. I do value near trace more, but far trace does have its value. So I do think fine is fine. And then we have Shamir, who has solo 4 and no follow-up. She does face a similar issue to Hilda, and she does have better fodder technically because she has a solo 4. But at the moment, you can't get both line of skills simply because there isn't any accessible attack speed solo 3 fodder, which is why I have her in fine also. As a combat unit, she's also fine. I don't think she's exactly amazing by any means, but she still does the job. But in a similar sense, I don't think she's nearly as good as someone like Byleth or Happy or Ingrid would be. As incomparable as that may be, I do find that her solo condition does hold her back quite a bit. However, for PvE contexts or Arena Assault, it's not the worst. And then we have Winter Sothis, who has Distant Counter and Special Fighter. She's not a bad unit at all, but her best performance is mainly going to come from a Savvy Fighter set, which you can't really get at the moment because it's only on Valentine's Lucina. So as far as a unit goes, she's still good, but a lot of her performance is locked behind a seasonal locked unit, which is why I don't think I should put her above fine. And her fodder isn't exactly amazing either. Distant Counter is good, but Special Fighter is whatever, and Threat and Attack Res is also whatever. And that's pretty much the fine tier. And then we get to No Thanks, which is basically just a culmination of units that don't really perform all the best, or they don't really have amazing fodder. And that isn't the worst when it comes to fodder. She has a dual rally and a ruse, which is perfectly fine. But we do get rallies every single month in the ephemeras, which is why I don't think her value is all that great. She does also have a ruse, which is fine, but I don't think overall it's going to allow her to go into the fine tier, especially comparatively to other units in that tier. I would just say her fodder is just mediocre at best, especially since she does, again, face a similar issue to Hilda and Shamir in the sense that it's already so commonplace, but it's not nearly as common as rally pluses are, especially nowadays, which is why I put her in no thanks. Summer Caspar, the reason I put him there is mainly because you could get him easily in the Code 3 path. There isn't anything he has that's amazing. Vectorfish is a good weapon, but it's not really anything you would want to prioritize, especially comparatively to other units. Summer Dorothea simply has Hone 4, which is whatever. There's so many 300 SPC slots that you could get in the game, and for the one that she comes with, it isn't exactly the best, so it's not really anything you would want to prioritize anyway. Edelgard doesn't really have any fodder per se. She has attack defense solo, which is okay, but everything else is just easily accessible through Grails or the normal pool, and as a combat unit, she isn't exactly the greatest at the moment, which is why I also have her in no thanks. Winter Hilda is a good unit, marred by the fact that she doesn't have good fodder. As a unit goes, she is really just going to be there for scoring, but as a one-off, she's not really going to be scoring all too well, which is also why I have her in no thanks. Hubert, it's Hubert. He doesn't really have fodder. Infantry Hexblade can be good for some tech, but outside of that, there really isn't much there, especially since his inheritable tome is easily accessible in the 3 and 4 star pool. Petra doesn't really have that great fodder either, and her performance isn't exactly the best. Ground orders can be nice, but overall, I wouldn't say it's anything worth prioritizing just because there are other means of getting movement, especially through someone like Peony who has her Orders Dance, which can just move any unit anywhere, which is really, really nice. So there are other options out there. Ravio has Plug-in Bow, which is pretty decent, but there are also a lot of other competitive bows in the game. But outside of the inheritable bow, he doesn't really have a lot of fodder, which is why I also put him in no thanks. Plug-in bow is fine. I don't really have any complaints with it. It's just that we have other bows that can honestly compete with plug-in in a lot of cases. And then we have Summer Sylvain, who is also easily accessible through codes, but also doesn't really have fodder, which is also why I put him in no thanks. And that's pretty much every unit here. Honestly, you could argue a lot of other spots and places, promotions, demotions, depending. But these were just my overall thoughts and opinions on what I believe should be prioritized. And again, this isn't me just trying to sway everyone into voting for certain characters, but rather I figured this just be a fun thing to do. But you'll have to let me know your thoughts down below because I'm also very curious on that. I don't really know how to close this out, so I'm just probably going to end it here. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you later.